सुख चैन की बरखा बरसे भारत भाग है जागा।
पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा।
चंचल सागर विंध्य हिमालय नीला यमुना गंगा।
तेरे नित गुण गाए
तुझसे जीवन पाए हर तन पाए आशा। सूरज बनकर जग पर चमके भारत नाम सुहाना। जय हो जय हो जय हो जय 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 हो भारत नाम सुभागा। जन गण मन अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा द्राविड़ उत्कल बंगा। विंध्य हिमाचल यमुना गंगा उच्छल जलधि तरंगा। तब शुभ नामे जागे तब शुभ आशीष मांगे। गाहे तब जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता। जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे।
Thank you, Harsh. Good evening, Bayview family. A quick update about all the projects and what is coming up ahead. Just a quick take about what's just gone by. So under the medical projects, we have continued to do our cataract surgeries, and we've finished 4 cataract surgeries till date in the month of August. And these are done by our members, Dr. Preetham and Himalini Samant. They are basically catering to all those who really need these surgeries at a very, very effective costing. So anybody who knows, people who need these cataract surgeries, please do reach out to him, and he would be more than happy to really help that out too. We finished on Independence Day. We did our celebration at St. Joseph's School. Members, I earnestly request everyone to please come forward whenever we have projects. Do come and look at those smiling faces. It is very inspiring and very, very heartwarming to see these children especially perform and give us all the blessings that we deserve for all that we do for them. So we gave them a menstrual hygiene talk over there, and which thereafter we kind of promoted to ask them and help them to look into the eco-friendly usage of sanitary napkins. Thereafter, with Samina Khurakiwala and our members, Praneet, Vimal, Darshan, we did visit Khel Khel Mein, which is opened up at Koliwara. And this place is a new center for all the children in that area to start an educational center. So basically, all those children in that area will be getting education through our Khel Khel Mein. Also, we have continued to do our Annapurnas, and our members, Yatish, Satyan, Vimal, and Jessica Hemani have been kind enough to sponsor the Annapurnas that have gone by and are coming in the month. So members, whenever there are lots of projects that we have visited and we've been getting regular appeals. So an earnest request for all our members to start putting in the funds that they have committed into our general fund, so we can really reach out to those who need our help. It will be wonderful if you all can come personally visit. Do reach out to Vimal, Samina, Sports Director, Preetham, Pradeep Kabra, and Sharad, so that we can really work towards finishing all the projects that we are lining up each week by week. So yes, moving forward, I will ask, that was the whole community service related thing, and I am sure everyone is looking forward to meeting in person. And so the club admin team has worked very, very hard, and they are going to put up a great, great event for all of us. And we are meeting in person on Sunday, Sunday brunch, which is starting at 11:30, 12. So please be there in full force and let us all have a great time. All safety norms are taken care of. So we definitely are looking forward to that. Now, I may please welcome Yasser, past President Yasser Fatehi, to please introduce the speaker for the evening.
Good evening. Thank you, President Jankna, for giving me the pleasure of introducing our guest speaker today, Hamzad Sorabji. Hamzad is an eminent personality in his field. He has been writing about cars since more than 25 years. He is an editor at Autocar and has driven everything on wheels. You will be surprised to know that he has driven a 65-ton battle tank to a Formula One car, and he still cannot get enough of it. Hamzad is a son of eminent personality, former Attorney General of India, Mr. Soli Sorabji. Hamzad has some things like his must-haves, which he must have his MacBook Pro at work and iPad at events. Hamzad also says, the way I dress up, I think someone will send the fashion police after me because he's very conservative in his dressing style. I take pleasure in inviting Hamzad to the club. Thank you, President Jang.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak today. A real pleasure to be here and address all of you all. Well, I think as briefly been said, I am very deeply and intimately involved with the automotive world for quite some time now. It started off with being involved with magazines. Actually, when I started, there were hardly any cars. There was just at that time of Maruti, Fiat, and Ambassador. So really not much to write about in those days when I had started out. But obviously, the auto industry has opened up so much, and we've just had a barrage of cars. So on an average, I'm fortunate enough to drive around 70 to 80 new cars per year. My job takes me all over the world. I've been fortunate enough to drive in 70 different countries on 6 continents. And clearly, it's a dream job for anyone who loves cars. And I think we constantly get this request, how can I become an auto journalist? So clearly, it's something which, how do I say, has been a passion for a long time. How did I get involved in it? Well, I think it started off by sitting on my dad's lap when I was 11 and driving in Mahabaleshwar on Polo Ground. I mean, everyone of my generation actually learned how to drive in Polo Ground in Mahabaleshwar because it's not far from Bombay. Everyone goes there. And it was an open field where it was absolutely empty and a great place to kind of cut your teeth behind the wheel. And the minute my feet could touch the pedal, my dad was very indulgent. He let me drive the car without him also at Polo Ground. So really, I think I owe my love for cars to him. My dad was not really a car guy at all, but I think he was an indulgent dad. And really, I think my passion for cars started over there. And clearly, when you have to write about them, you get more deeply involved with it. And in that sense, we do a lot with vehicles. I think one of the things I'd say that I really enjoy doing is long road trips. And we've done a lot of them. And by long, I really mean long. We've driven for our magazine, Autocar India. We've done trips like we've driven from Germany to India. Which was a 45-day trip. It took 20,000 kilometers. We did it in a pair of Audi Q7s. It was an amazing experience driving through, of course, Europe and then across Russia, all the way to Lake Baikal, down into Mongolia, China, then into Myanmar and into India. So quite a circuitous route, actually. We call it the long way back because the traditional way of doing it, which was through Iran and Afghanistan. I don't think we'll ever be able to drive in Afghanistan in a hurry. That was obviously off bounds. So that's the way we would do long distance trip. Then we follow that up with a drive from Delhi to Paris in a small Renault Kwid. The other drives I've done, which I've really enjoyed, are again from India to Singapore. That was part of a big kind of a convoy of cars of 30 cars. We took a whole group of 30 cars. It was for the Indo-ASEAN expedition. Actually, it was a government-led drive, which we had done. And it was really amazing because we were given the task of organizing all the logistics. And you can imagine taking 30 cars through about 9 countries is no mean task. And I think also very special was the SAARC rally we had done, which was in 2007. That was a time when the SAARC countries were very active. So we drove through Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and believe it or not, even Pakistan. So that's when relationship was pretty good. It was really before the Mumbai terror attacks, after which everything went south. But at that point, it was possible to drive across the Wagah border, which we did again in a big convoy, drove all the way to Islamabad and came back. And again, a fascinating experience. And more recently, which was in 2019, again, a very unique trip, is we did a drive in Iran, which again is actually possibly my most memorable drive and fantastic drive, because for one, Iran is one of the most beautiful countries I've been to, and I think one of the most enjoyable experiences. It's really not what you read about in the media. People are friendly. It's very easygoing. The natural beauty there is phenomenal. The architecture is fantastic. The history is phenomenal, and which they're very proud of, going all the way back to the Achaemenid Empire. And again, over there, we did something quite unique, is we shipped cars from India to the port, which is Bandar Abbas, and then had them on a trailer going, to the start point. For us, it was Tehran. And then we had 24 people who I had invited myself, all Parsis, because they wanted to go back to their roots. And we drove in 6 Mahindras all the way to Shiraz over about 10 days. So that was really unique. Indian cars in Iran. All of them were connected with radio. So it was quite a logistical challenge, but it was amazing. And I think these road trips, which we've been doing over the years, which I've really enjoyed and given great experiences. I think, again, in India, I've been fortunate enough to go to 4 corners of the country. I've driven, in one shot from Kashmir, starting from Kargil all the way to Kanyakumari. That was a fun trip. It was in the 2 extremes of the car market back then. That was in 2001. I had a Maruti 800 and a high-end Merc. So just to show the 2 contrasts of the car market at that time, and the 2 contrasts in terms of, north and south, maximum distance. And that was again followed up by a drive west to east. So the westernmost point, which was in Gujarat, in Kutch, all the way to Kibitu in Arunachal Pradesh, which is again the easternmost point, very close to the China border over there. So really, my job has been driving all kinds of cars and through different terrains, through everywhere. But still, I think one of my favorite routes is very close to home, which is to Mahabaleshwar, because I think the drive to Mahabaleshwar really tests any car, and I enjoy doing it via the old route, which not many people do now, which is Mahad and up the Poladpur Ghat. It's really enjoyable, and it really gives a car a good workout, because you get all kinds of terrain conditions. Road is good, road is bad, single lane road. So, just the overtaking ability of the car, all that can be tested. And then finally, you're at a beautiful destination. So for me, that's really the real test of a car, is I have to take it once to Mahabaleshwar. Otherwise, a road test isn't complete for me. And again, what I'd like to touch upon is, what's happening in the car market. I think I'd like to touch upon electric vehicles. There's a lot of, let's say it's become a very hot topic right now. People are wondering, the whole future of electric vehicles. The future is there. Definitely electric vehicles are going to come. In India, we've had a late start. But the growth in electric vehicles has been phenomenal, actually. And there are more and more models coming. So right now we only have 6 models for people to buy, which is really not too much of a choice. And that's one thing that is limiting the growth of electric vehicles. And I think, but I've had some experiences in electric vehicles also. And the main thing is the range. which people are worried about. So really people want to know how practical are electric vehicles to drive. I've been running them for many months now, various ones. And what I'd like to share is that in Mumbai, it's not a problem if you have a secure parking with a charging plug point. Then it's in fact very, very convenient, because all you have to do is come home, plug it in, and overnight, typically, most of them do get charged. A lot of the companies are offering wall box chargers or fast chargers, which they can install in your house or in your parking lot or even in your society. So that makes it a lot easier right now. But driving it is really a breeze, because what people don't realize is that electric vehicles, just by its very nature, are very talky to drive, in the sense their response is very good. They respond immediately. There's no hesitation. There are no gears to change. Even in an automatic, sometimes you can feel the gears automatically changing. There's none of that. It's just one seamless flow of power, and it's very, very silent. So once you drive an electric car, you just get addicted to the ease of driving and that feeling of that whole refinement that it offers. And it's something which I particularly enjoy driving in Mumbai, because it's just perfect. And even when you're at a traffic light, you feel good, because you're not just idling over there, emitting noxious gases or wasting fuel. You just stop there, silent cars, just quietly humming away, running the peripherals and not using any energy at all. So really, from a city perspective, it makes so much sense right now. But I think I have to share an experience with taking it out of town. So I had this Mercedes EQC, which, the range is rated at over 400 kilometers. So clearly, there are a lot of challenges when driving an electric vehicle. Still, many when you go out of town. So unlike a normal fuel car where it's predictable, there's no hassle. Taking an electric vehicle out, there's always uncertainty and a bit of drama going on the highway. And when I had gone, there were no real charging points still on the expressway. I believe they're coming up now, but they're too far and few between. And sometimes even when you go there, the challenge is sometimes they're not working, or there's already a car over there. So there's always that little stress about taking an electric vehicle out of town. So clearly, I think, EVs, again, just to sum up, very, very convenient in town. And, if any one of you, want something that is non-polluting, easy to drive, and you do have a charging point, it's really worth looking at. Of course, the costs are still quite expensive. They're not value for money, because the battery costs are still very high in an electric vehicle, and a lot of the battery cells are still imported. So clearly that becomes a bit of an issue when you're trying to, if you're looking at it from a cost perspective. So, but I think going forward, there are a lot of EVs are coming into the market. You've got companies like Tata Motors, which have really taken the lead on EVs. They're the number one EV manufacturer today with the highest sales. They're constantly launching more cars. So I think in time, the charging network will improve, and the range of these cars will improve, and even the costs will come down. So I think it's just a matter of time, but I still think we'll have a good 10 years before the sales of EVs overtake the sales of of the normal cars. And again, coming to the cars, we've had a very our market also has been quite dynamic. To be honest, we don't have the choice that you do in more mature markets like in Europe, where there's a big plethora of choice. Because what has happened right now is that there's some very tough regulations, both for emissions, for pollution, and for safety, which have over the last few years, a lot of models have been discontinued for that. And what we have seen also is that a lot of diesel cars have gone out of the market. And some may think that's a good thing, but frankly, I'm a big believer that diesels have become so clean right now that they're not an issue from a pollution standpoint, and from a CO2 or carbon dioxide standpoint, they're very, very good because they are about 20-25% more efficient than petrol cars. So, but now, so the choice overall is quite limited. But again, there's a lot of choice that is happening, and I just want to touch upon some of the big new launches that have happened this year, and they're fundamentally all on the SUVs. So before I get to that, I just want to share with you why I think SUVs are the flavor of the month. And should you be looking at an SUV or not, or should you be looking at a different kind of car? Well, SUVs the world over have really taken over. It's the fastest growing segment. Every manufacturer has to have an SUV in its portfolio, otherwise they won't really do well. That's one of the reasons Honda has actually slipped down, because they've not had an effective SUV in their portfolio. So Honda, which was really doing well, when it kicked off about 20 years ago, isn't right up there challenging for the top spot. In fact, it has slipped. It doesn't have SUVs. So you'll see all the main the leaders. They've got at least one SUV in their portfolio. And again, coming to SUVs, they are very, very, very practical options right now. And there are several reasons for that, and why people want that is, one is it's the stance. And clearly people like a high seating position. It gives you a better sense of control. And really, in places where the roads are bad, you've got speed breakers, potholes, the ground clearance of an SUV is very, very practical. So you really don't have to worry too much about the road condition. And even when you're going out of town, the kind of roads, especially in the monsoons, they just disintegrate everywhere. That's why SUVs really are quite popular. Also, what's happened is that over the years, unlike SUVs 20 years ago, which really felt like trucks, SUVs today are much more user-friendly. And it's much more car-like. So it's really not that much different from driving a hatchback. And also they've become lighter. Earlier they were very heavy. Again, they had these big frames on which SUVs were bolted on. But right now they're fundamentally small little hatchbacks which are on stills. So again, you've got the best of both worlds. You've got the utility of an SUV, which is the space, the toughness, the high ground clearance, and the ease of driving something like a hatchback, because they're very maneuverable. They're all automatics. They come with good engines, and they come with good features. And that's the other thing which I want to talk on is, right now, the battle has moved into cabins. So people spend so much time in their cars that the cabin has become super important. And within that is all the electronic features. Fundamentally, what people want today is a car to be like a smartphone on wheels. So all manufacturers are giving what they call this, or they will be giving, the rage is to give this connected technology, where you've even got a separate SIM card in some certain cars, which kind of pair to your phone, and it gives you a whole bunch of features like it would in a phone. You've got a whole bunch of apps also in your car. So really, cars are becoming more and more smartphone on wheels. And that leads to another problem that there's been right now. Many of you might have heard of the semiconductor shortage, which is there because a lot of these electronics require lots of semiconductors, and there's a global shortage of them, which is why there's it's kind of had a big impact on production. People, car manufacturers just can't produce enough cars because they can't get enough semiconductors. And I think any of you all in the market for buying a car might have experienced that there are long waiting periods now for cars. So that has become an issue. So really, in a way, the discounts also have kind of not evaporated, but they're not there. And the real challenge right now is not how much can you get off on a car, but how quickly can you get on a car. So really, these are very dynamic times in the car market. And clearly, I think what's also important is that in pandemic times, personal mobility has become more important. And I think, more and more people are looking at a car as a higher priority. I mean, earlier people were not looking at it as much as with that much importance. But now, people have also saved. That's what we found, that the discretionary spending has gone. You can't go out, you can't enjoy, you can't go on holidays as much. So people have saved up, and I think a car has become super important purely from a safety point of view. It's become like your PPE suit on wheels, your bubble on wheels, really to keep you safe. And I think this is leading to some interesting trends where we think that revenge travel is going to come back. More and more people want to hit the road. I think there's so much of this COVID fatigue. People want to just get out. And I think there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, just to give you another experience, after the first lockdown was lifted, I went to Delhi. I just gone there for some work and also to meet my dad, who I hadn't met for about, I think, maybe 5 months. So that was in October last year. Lockdown was in March. So yeah, so a little more than that. And just on an impulse, coming back, there was this really fast BMW, which I was driving, and the car was going to be kind of transported to Bombay. And they just asked me, like, I just told them, listen, can I just drive it down? And they said, yeah. And then just on an impulse, I just literally tore up my air ticket back to Mumbai and got into the car and drove Delhi to Bombay in this BMW M8, 600 plus horsepower, absolutely fantastic. And at that time, the roads were empty. It was still just coming out of the lockdown. And places I stayed at that time were we stayed at the Taj properties, again, because you just want to be sure of safety and hygiene, and you could see that the protocols were really good at that point. But driving, the roads were really empty, and it was an absolute blast. And actually what I felt really sad about is that the good old dhaba where you normally stop to have something, they were closed. Business was really down. So I'd done things which I hadn't done before, was take the packed lunch and just have a picnic on the road. So the point being is that, if you just got to be careful of how you expose yourself. But there's nothing like a great road trip. And Rajasthan's roads were just absolutely phenomenal. And I think, that was really the first trip. And after that, I couldn't get enough of driving. Then soon after, we went to the Atal Tunnel. So the Atal Tunnel had just just opened, and we thought, let's do a drive in it. The BRO, Border Roads, they've done a phenomenal job on it. They're really entrusted with it, and in fact, it's an amazing organization, the way they build roads and the quality of roads they build. So they supported us and actually shut down the tunnel, and we had this really, again, another very, very powerful Audi RSQ8 600 horsepower SUV, where we're just blasting up and down the tunnel. And I tell you, the tunnel is about 9 kilometers long. And I think we did it in about 3-4 minutes. You can calculate the average speed. So, and it was an amazing experience for the simple reason that any of you who have been to that part of the world where there's this big range, Rohtang Pass, that's where everyone would go over. So on the Manali side, you've got, the typical trees and very alpine kind of a environment and setting and landscape. The minute you go through the Atal Tunnel and come on the other side, you think you're in a different world, because you've got this very stark kind of a landscape, because you've gone into the rain shadow, because that whole section is divided by these huge mountains, with Rohtang Pass at 14,000 feet being part of it. And it was just an amazing experience to know that just like that, one tunnel connects two different parts of like two different worlds. And I think what's really amazing is for the people on the other side is that they have all-weather access, because until the tunnel came, they were cut off for 6 months in the winter, because the passes were so heavily snowed in, you couldn't come the traditional way, which is over Rohtang Pass. But now with the tunnel, they've got all-weather access. And it was just phenomenal. So that was a really phenomenal road trip which we had done. And again, we've got a lot of drives now planned. We're going to be doing something in Ladakh. So really, I think for us, it's always being on the road, writing about what the new cars are, the new trends are, and obviously we are very excited about the whole shift to EV. Again, people tend to get very sometimes overexcited about it. It's got to be a very logical progression. And though I think manufacturers are giving us a lot of options. And I think, what I'd like to quickly end on saying that, personal mobility, it's never been more important. And I think in today's age, it's become more of a right than just a privilege, So I think it's really important that the automobile sector is kind of treated in a way to produce affordable motoring right now, because right now costs are through the roof. Cars have become super expensive. Look at the price of petrol. It's ridiculous. So to just run a car has just become totally unaffordable, which is unfortunate. But I think, something should be done on that. And there's only so much the auto industry can do. I think needs a lot of government support to make sure that, consumers can have access to cheap and affordable motoring. Yeah. And I think with that, I just like to open the floor to questions. Just a quick wrap up on what I do, and just to give you a quick sense on the car market.
May I ask a question, please? Sorry, go ahead, Jankana. Sorry.
So Zamir, yeah, you can start. There are a couple of questions in the chat box also, but you can definitely start that. You have already taken the floor.
Sorry, Hormaz, my name is Zamir Vanvati.
Hi.
Hi. I want to know, when you do these international trips, how much before do you have to pre-plan visas, roads, routes, where you're staying, what you're going to, whether you will get the kind of food if you got a vegetarian there or stuff like that, especially when you're going to roads less traveled on?
Yeah, so I think it's a minimum of, it's around 4 to 6 months, but generally 6 months. Because it depends on the country. Now, if it's something like China, they require a lot of lead time. So they need details of, especially for the vehicles, it's more the vehicles.
Okay.
So they need details of the chassis number, the color. So the vehicle has to be kind of locked in a good 4 to 6 months before. And then all the other paperwork starts. So basically it's that your visas, and you need permits to cross certain areas. So once you have that paperwork, you're good to go. But it's not easy. There are challenges at borders. But what we do is we engage certain partners who are experts in their field. So we are met at different points of the border, and they facilitate the border crossings. But border crossings, can be difficult. But if you have your papers absolutely right, it's not such a problem.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to continue with all the questions that have been, and there have been lots and lots of questions coming in over here. So you said that you've been driving through Iran. Was it a nightmare is one of the questions that has come in, which is together with, would you like to also organize a fun weekend with us for a drive that you have been saying, and they seem to be really very enterprising ones. So can we really be having one of those enterprising ones also?
Yeah. So, driving in Iran, the way we did it, honestly, it wasn't a nightmare for the simple reason we drove in a convoy. We had a pilot car and a sweep car. But the thing about Iran is that it's one country where the driving is probably worse than India. So in that sense, totally, especially in Tehran, and the taxi drivers, my God, the way they zip and cut. And in fact, I remember driving in Tehran, just going down one of their main roads, and suddenly from the left, this guy with 4 on a bike just cut across 4 lanes because he had overshot an exit and he wanted to make the exit. And I had to suddenly brake and stuff like that. Yeah, so it's a nightmare in that way, but honestly, you get used to it. We kind of think, but it's otherwise amazing place to go. And the only way to go is by car because the scenery is so beautiful. The road network is fabulous, broad highways everywhere. So it's only in the cities it can get a little chaotic, but on the highways there's not too much traffic. So that way it's great. And yeah, I mean, we're more than happy to organize drives. That's what we do. We've organized a lot of multiple kinds of trips for different groups. And someone like your group, we can curate it to exactly want to a place less traveled. It's not a problem at all. We've got a fantastic team, which number one ensures safety. We are generally connected by radio throughout. So it's a lot of planning going. We've got backup cars, support cars, so all that. Yeah, so that's maybe a different conversation, but we definitely can organize some interesting drives in India.
So we surely will catch up on that one. And we will definitely ask Manish to get in touch with you and get the further details for the same. as many members, whoever wants to join can definitely take up this lovely car journey and take over for all those who have this lovely spirit of going on a road trip.
Right, absolutely.
So moving further, we've got this question, which typically a commercial question, which says that SUVs are up to 40 lakhs. And so what is your suggestion about an SUV per se? Which one is the one that is the best? And there is another SUV suggestion from 15 to 20 lakhs. So what would you suggest between the 40 range and the 15 to 20 range?
Well, up to 40 lakhs, it's that, as you're going above between 20 to 40, there's not too much choice over there. But I think a car that's really good value, which I like, is and it's just been revamped, is the Jeep Compass. It's like well below 40 lakhs. For the simple reason, it's a great go anywhere car. It's a nice size. It's got a strong engine. The ride is really good on bad roads. It kind of takes the bumps phenomenally well. It's a great highway car. It's a great car on any surface. So that's really pretty good. I think the other car which is coming, which could be good, slightly might just cross that thing, is the Volkswagen Tiguan, a petrol version of that coming. It's a 5-door, again, very smooth ride, very solidly built car, but a little expensive because it's an import. So it's not phenomenal value for money. But sorry.
No. Carry on. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So you get but you get your money's worth in the safety and the attention to detail it has. 15 to 20 lakhs, I think I would narrow down on two Korean cars, which is the Seltos and the Creta. In fact, I just came home in a Seltos today, and I was just still looking at the interior cabin quality. It's really amongst the best that there is. So as an all-purpose car, I like the Seltos. Creta is also very good, very similar because they're sister cars, very well equipped. Hyundai service generally a bit better, especially in Mumbai. But between these two, I would go for either the Seltos or the Creta.
So yes, all of those who wanted to look at that 15 to 20 and the 40 range, you have the answer there. There is this question about the same question which I think you addressed before, is about the driving license permits. And does international license work in all the countries, or do you have to do a little bit of a different work over there, or does it work with whatever you have already?
So in most countries, your international driving works, but in a country like China, you have to apply for a special driving license. And that again is something that takes time. So the minute you enter China, the first thing you have to do is go to the first authority and kind of where they issue these licenses. So typically it's the first town after you cross the border where you do that, and you have to get and that paperwork has to be done in advance. Without that, you're not legally allowed to drive in China. So it's risky to do that. So they give you a special, not only they give you a special license, they give you a special number plate for your car. So that's the other, but otherwise in most other countries, your international driving license sort of works where I've driven.
I'm sure as of right now, nobody really wants to visit China. So, but yeah, other countries we could continue to take their chances, which anyways has our driving license approved. So fairly one can't really go over there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the next question is about F1. I think most of us would really like to know about that.
Oh, sorry, I didn't talk about.
Yeah, that's something. The fast racing cars.
So, I mean, it's very hard to describe how incredibly the power and performance of a Formula One car, because the Formula One car is actually the fastest machine on wheels on any circuit. I mean, you see any lap record of any circuit where a Formula One car has driven, and it's probably, a Formula One car holds the lap record if they've driven on that. So I think what is really incredible first is the sheer acceleration. It kind of just the way it goes forward. I mean, 0 to 100, they do in around under 3 seconds, but it's beyond that. And how quickly you can hit 300, your brain takes time to kind of process that sort of speed. But more but I think what is even more kind of mind-boggling is the brakes, because you're going at these crazy speeds, and then the corner comes, and your mind is telling you to stop. So when you brake a lot earlier, and then you realize you brake too early. So you have to still accelerate to the corner. So then you try and build up that courage to have faith in the brakes and brake even later. But unless I definitely couldn't. But and I think what it did was if when you drive a Formula One car, your whole perspective or your respect for a Formula One driver just goes up 1,000-fold, because to see that they're racing in cars at those speeds, which is so kind of I would say beyond your comprehension to drive, and they're racing at that speed is amazing. So someone like even a Narain Karthikeyan, just his sheer talent to drive a Formula One car and fast and be competitive when you've got everyone racing around you. It's amazing. And the other thing is the sheer cornering grip of a Formula One car. I mean, that is a different level. You just certain corners which these guys take absolutely flat out at 260, 280 kilometers an hour. When you approach that corner, you're starting to brake because you cannot imagine the kind of grip it has. And I remember the first time I drove a Formula One car, it was so, let's say physically demanding that I think I couldn't get out of bed the next day, just because of the G forces and the way it pummels you. I was just completely finished. So really, even from a physical standpoint, they are very, very difficult to drive.
So I believe it's a discipline with the F1 racing, and definitely respect and salute, as you rightly said, for all of those who are into, and that's why they are paid so supremely well, and a lot of discipline that goes into it. And I'm sure the adrenaline rush is of a different level altogether, and no kind of high that would any other substance would be substituting that, definitely. So
Absolutely.
yeah, so salute to all those F1 racers, and definitely the kind of joy that they give just by us visualizing them taking a ride on those rough roads, and they just take spins over that. So yeah, we also have some member who has visited Iran on a very similar kind of journey, but it was a nightmarish journey for him. Praneeth Naheta, he says that it wasn't as good as the one that you narrated, and it was a pretty scary kind of an experience for him. And
I don't know whether Praneeth drove there or was driven there. Normally people go by bus, so I don't know how it was.
Praneeth, would you like to speak about that, or should I move further?
Yeah, I drove myself. I mean, I have a friend staying there, local friend. I was driving his car in Tehran. It was in the city though. So yeah. Tehran is unbelievably crazy.
Crazy. Yeah, that's right. That's what I said. Yeah, so, absolutely.
Driving myself, so I'm like, hats off to you to be able to do a road trip in Tehran.
Yeah. So we drive anywhere and anything. So, it's just par for the course. Yeah.
So I think the next question is very similar to what the scary experiences that you have. So Harsh would like to know us, what is the scariest ever experience on these road trips that you really, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, I think, fortunately, we've not had any dangerous trip because we really go well planned. I'll be honest on that. But I think for me, the scariest experience was when I was doing the Himalayan rally. In 1986, I was the youngest. Wow. And my co-driver was the oldest driver. He was a gentleman called Django Nicholson, who was quite well known at that time. He was ex-sheriff of Mumbai. So we had a 50-year-old difference between us. So we were called the youngest and the oldest. So the thing was, he would take the start and I would drive in the, where the speed was and the action was. And it was, one night, and it was near Almora, and I was really going fast, and I think I overdid it, and I toppled the car. And luckily it toppled on the side of the mountain, and we banged against the side. Otherwise, if we'd gone the other way, we would have gone down some 1,000 feet. And I don't know whether I'd be here talking to you guys, but still the car was rolled. It landed on its roof upside down. Funnily enough, now it's funny. Mr. Nicholson was asleep and he woke up, completely dazzled and told me, just think, so I have to tell him, sorry, Django uncle, I've rolled the car, and we were hanging upside down like bats because, you're strapped in with your harness. And then we got out. Luckily, I was, was an old man then. But he was absolutely fine. We were both fine without a scratch. Luckily, the car had a roll cage and a proper safety belt. So we had taken all the safety precautions.
Sorry, I'm going to cut you. What
Was it
car
the Maruti
make?
Gypsy?
What is
It
the
was
car?
Maruti Gypsy. Yeah, it was a Gypsy.
Yeah, it was the Gypsy.
Yeah, it was a Gypsy. So we were in the Gypsy. Everyone rallied a Gypsy at that time. And Gypsies are generally unstable because they have a narrow track. So you've got to really be very careful with them. One bump and it can, bite you. So and that's what happened. So we rolled but we pushed the car back, but unfortunately the car was damaged and we couldn't complete the rally. So that was too bad. But yeah, that was a scary moment.
So other than the rally, no real experiences wherein it was an experience of being traumatized or unhappy with the local people who really gave you a hard time or anything. None of those.
No, I don't think so, because as I said, I think fortunately enough, we kind of, you just build up a very deep experience to kind of foresee any kind of situation. And our style has been, or let's say not our style, but the way we do things is we involve the local authorities to the maximum possible, and even local governments. Because honestly, we are doing these as official events. We have to write about them, we have to shoot them, so we can't afford to have anything go wrong. Probably if I went just as a tourist alone, me and my wife just hit the road and go, just take it as it comes, more chance of having some experience that may not be nice. But the way we did this, because we have to kind of create content around it, we can't afford to have things go wrong, because again, you're on a very tight schedule. So we make sure that's why the planning takes so long. It takes about 6 months. We even go to the point of we identify the hotels, because sometimes our trips, if there are 30 cars, you have to make sure that there's parking for the hotels in the hotel. You can't park these cars on the road. So we even do things like secure the parking for the cars, because you don't want them broken into and stuff like that. So yeah, I think at the most we've had some stern looking border, let's say border guards. We had one in Belarus when we moved from Poland to Belarus, not very friendly and just kept us, but there was no problem. I think once we got through, it was fine. So I think, yeah, we've actually, touch wood, we've not had any kind of, let's say, unpleasant experiences.
So yes, that's great. It does make a road trip better when you don't have to really face those kind of untoward experiences. There is this constant banter that is going on the chat box regarding the Jeep and the Seltos. There's one whole group that is saying Jeep is a no-brainer, and there's one group that is saying Seltos is money worth. So if you could throw some light over there and just give them, is it a no-brainer or one should go for Seltos?
Well, look, I think the Jeep overall is a better vehicle, but it's far more expensive. So, it's not the same value for money that a Seltos is. And Seltos still is very strong on certain things like the features, the infotainment system, which is much better. But again, the new Jeep has improved that. So if I were to buy a car, personally, I would go for the Compass, just because it's a solid car. I like the way it drives. But, as a city car, the Seltos is great. It really depends on what you're doing. If you're going to be mainly in the city, the Seltos petrol automatic really does the job quite well. And, it's very comfortable, very feature rich. And in that sense, good value for money. The Jeep, the very, very capable car. Again, the interior also has been redone. And, it's a car that can take a lot of beating, and, you'll feel very safe in it.
So yes, there is this Jeep is a different pedigree, no real comparison with Seltos possible. So I believe all those who are Jeep fans here have been constantly just speaking about how good Jeep is all about. So yes, all those who are ready to buy, go for the Jeep. Our member Urvi will definitely give us all a great discount. So we have a member amongst us who is, she has her own company, the Landmark Showroom. And
I know Sanjay Thakkar very well.
Yeah. Hi, Hormas. This is Urvi. I'm Sanjay's sister-in-law, and I'm a partner.
Hi.
Hi.
Yeah.
Yes, so we're all ready to buy these cars from Urvi's showroom very shortly now.
Please, please, most welcome.
So moving further, there's this, do you also do road trips, a few in UAE, which is in from the location of India? And what is a good, would you rate a good
Off-roading,
road trip?
off-roading.
Maybe something in Maharashtra.
So I think honestly, we haven't done any in UAE because that's very easy to do. We rather choose countries which are more difficult to do. We've done a lot in Myanmar. Myanmar's been another one of our favorite countries. I've been there personally 7 times, and Myanmar is just unbelievable. Burma. So we'd rather do these sort of road trips because we built an expertise of doing road trips where it's difficult.
Sorry, Janka, I'm talking about off-roading. It's not a road trip. I'm talking about off-roading.
Oh, sorry.
Okay.
off-road, yeah.
I am so sorry. I'm like, because there was a little bit of confusion that, yes, sorry, if you could answer that question.
Yeah, so again, off-roading, we've not done in UAE, but again, honestly, we don't think we could add much value there because that's such a finely developed industry already, off-roading in UAE. You got a lot of guys over there. If at all, we would just outsource it to someone. I think the areas which we are looking at are Jordan. There's a lot of potential over there. So I think Jordan is one place where we would like to do some serious off-roading, and that Wadi Rum area. It's absolutely fabulous, and that's something which we were looking at, but again the pandemic hit. But that's something how do I say that's on our list right now.
Yeah, I've had the opportunity to drive in Jordan, right from Amman to down south, and it's
fabulous,
an amazing experience because roads are fantastic and no traffic at all.
Exactly. The best thing is you have to drive where there's no traffic and the roads are good and the scenery is good. That's what makes a great road.
But Amman is
off-roading in India.
10 years behind Bombay, so you can imagine how chaotic Amman can be.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
What about off-roading in India?
So off-roading in India, we've done a fair bit. We've done it in Rajasthan. We do quite a lot over there. And, again, we have partners. I think for me, Rajasthan's the best place to do it. There's something special about driving over dunes. And, I think it's quite safe also. That's the whole thing. You can't hit anything. And yet it is a great experience. You get stuck. You can, the recovery is not so difficult. So there are more challenging tracks in the south. But I like Rajasthan, and I think those are really some great off-roading there. Around Jaisalmer, we've done some trips over there. There's some off-roading there.
So yes, from off-roading to again coming back to the cost and maintenance between Jeep and the Korean cars.
So I think the Korean cars would be cheaper because their parts are more locally produced. And in fact, Hyundai, we did a survey and Hyundai had one of the lowest costs of maintenance. So that's a strategy from the Koreans who are deeply invested here. So clearly in terms of that, I think the Koreans win as far as maintenance costs go. I mean, the Compass is an expensive car. It's a more upmarket car. So, in correspondingly, even the maintenance is a bit higher.
But it doesn't need maintenance, so I guess it kind of sets it off.
I don't want to tell you what happened to one Compass. We were driving in the Run of Kutch yesterday. So,
Okay, some other time.
yeah.
Urvi is not going to let it go through this. She is going to definitely make some people get this car because she knows that it is one of the best cars. She is there having that, right?
Can I have a question?
Sure, please go ahead.
Why haven't American cars really taken off in our country? Why? I mean, we are still very Southeast Asian driven where automobiles are concerned. Even German cars, apart from your BMWs and Mercedes, really haven't taken off. Like you see the Volkswagen on and off.
Yeah, I think it's a lot to do with what is suitable for the market now. American cars are generally big cars. America is a big car market for them.
I used to own a GMC and I used to drive that. It was amazing.
Yeah, so you know how big they are. Yeah, they like their pickup trucks.
Like Bombay.
So they all like big cars over there. I mean, for them, a compact car is something like a Toyota Corolla. That's what they call a compact car. So which is a luxury car for us. So it's just totally out of sync with the needs for India. We are fundamentally a small car market. We are fundamentally a market where most people can't afford much. Again, that's what I was leading to in the beginning, that cars have become unaffordable. And the German cars also are generally more expensive to maintain because of their whole philosophy. You know, they don't like to repair parts, they like to replace them, because labor is very expensive over there. So they don't have what they call too many child parts. They don't break down. I remember I had a Volkswagen Passat, which we were testing, and the alternator packed up. They don't fix the alternator because they replace it, and the replacement was some 55,000 rupees. So, you know, that sort of thing doesn't go down well over here. Whereas with cars which are locally produced, they go down into the sub parts of the child parts. So let's say in another car, if the alternator fails, they'll go in to see what was wrong with the armature, the brushes, and replace that part itself rather than just replacing the whole thing. So it's fundamentally a cost-driven issue that German and European cars don't do as well.
So moving from the costing factor and why the American cars and they don't, we are again coming back to don't really appeal to the Indian market. The question again is, what are the 5 best road trips that you would recommend in India? I know Mahabaleshwar would be top on your list, as you've already mentioned, for the best road that you have recommended on. But what are the rest 4?
So I think for me, I would say Ladakh is a bucket list one, going through the Atal Tunnel and doing it via Manali, because that is really spectacular. It's quite hard. So I think that I would rate top right now, because it's that much easier also with Rohtang gone, and through Atal Tunnel, it's more accessible. And then you go into the Spiti side and all, it's superb. And then, going up through these multiple passes, Baralacha, Tanglangla, and then coming on to the other side. So for me, Ladakh's very special. I did it first in '87 when it was just totally barren. Now, right now it's become very touristy, but still it's something which, one has to do. Then I think for me, Rajasthan is a must also. And there are some fabulous roads around Jaisalmer, close to the border, which you can drive. And those are really, you can drive at some crazy speeds over there. It's really completely empty. So we've taken some supercars there, which was really, again, awesome. Then I think for me, another fabulous roads. I mean, I like, funnily enough, driving in Madhya Pradesh also now, especially going to some of the game sanctuaries, because the roads are pretty good. In fact, I drove to Satpura, and over there, the roads are good in the sense that you need a SUV, but they're so picturesque, and they're so kind of, with nothing around you, that sense of desolation which you crave for in India. You sometimes get it in these deep forests. Then for me, again, Kutch is fabulous. I didn't go there, but a team of mine just drove back today from it. And again, that is just against the expanse, nothingness over there. Driving in the little run where you can drive across these dirt roads, absolutely empty. That is really, really superb. And I've driven in the Northeast also, and again, another area which is totally virgin and unexplored is Arunachal. Bit of a hardship thing because places are not great to stay there, but fabulous scenery, again, no traffic, and it's a part of the world which is so unexplored. Really friendly people. Yeah, so I think these are just very extreme roads. I mean, the others are also good, the typical ones, but I think that's a lot of them are quite been done a lot, and they're nothing really unique or that special.
So when you just mentioned that you did visit these places wherein you have met the people over there, you would also have to board over there with certain people that are locals over there.
Yeah.
So it would be eating their food, living in their style, and managing to understand them.
Yeah, either that, or I'll be honest, very often the army over there has been very hospitable. So, we kind of bunk in their mess at times. So I think that's something which we've done. We did that in the Northeast. at that point, and sometimes in Ladakh we've done that. So yeah, I mean it's a combination of both. But yeah, otherwise you just whatever kind of so-called arrangement that there is, you just bunk in there with the locals.
So that must be an experience, definitely. So also about you just mentioning that you've gone to Ladakh and you've traveled the area from going to the altitudes which are very, very low altitudes. How do you manage while you are going to these low altitudes? Does it really give you any kind of
you mean high altitudes?
Yeah, sorry, my bad. The high altitude, the Spiti Valley, which is typically where in Ladakh and Spiti Valley and all, wherein people do have sickness due to the altitude.
Yeah. So absolutely. I mean, it hits different people in different ways. I personally get really badly hit by what they call altitude sickness. Your head is bursting. It is just terrible, and you're just constantly feeling that nauseous and sick. And clearly, I think the main thing to do is acclimatize or go up gradually. I mean, I've done things like flown into Leh. So when you do that, you need to take at least a day or two to acclimatize before you do any kind of physical or strenuous work. And then it's, much easier. But and even when you're driving up from Manali, it's quite a drive up. So a lot of people, what they would do is, you've got to alter it. They would, a halfway point, you can't do it in a day, or people don't do it in a day. They would say the halfway point is Sarchu, but that was 14,000 feet up and very, very uncomfortable. So you really have a bad night over there, and, you feel breathless, and also people would stay, a little below, maybe in a place like Jispa, which is around 10,000-11,000 feet, or Keelong, and then try and do the whole thing in one shot. So the idea is to, if you're going to very high places like Rohtang and all, not to spend too much time there, just go there, spend a bit, don't do anything strenuous, and then come back down to the altitude you've kind of acclimatized at. Yeah. But so I think just got to keep these few things in mind, and it's not such a problem. But acclimatization is the most important thing.
So yeah, that's something that is definitely worthwhile with the road trip. Definitely. Yeah, I believe Shashank wants to ask a question.
So, what's your view on the CCTV surveillance in terms of the speed limits in the country, and what's the top speed that you've touched, and in which car?
So, obviously for us, the CCTVs is a bit of a dampener. Have to be careful. But I think worse than that is this new regulation where after 120 kilometers, you've got this constant beep, which can drive you mad. I think that's more of a deterrent for speeding. I don't know if you know, but every new car that's sold now, after 120, there's a constant warning beep. So, but the CCTVs, obviously on the expressway, there are quite a few of them. So one has to be careful. But the fastest I've done in India, and frankly, we did on a closed road to set a top speed record, is 332 kilometers an hour in an Audi R8. We shut the road for that. We got special permission, and it was a stretch of the ring road in Hyderabad, which was just about to be open. So before it got open to the public, we did a drive on it. It's there on YouTube. You all can check it out. So 332, the speedo actually showed 338, but we measured it with a GPS, so it was accurately 332, and currently that's the top speed that stands. But recently I went to a test track, which again was amazing. It's the largest of its kind in Asia. It's an 11.3 kilometer long test track, 11.3 kilometers. And it's got a very gradual banking. And I did just now recently about 320 Ks on that track. So yeah, so been constantly doing over 300, but in a safe and legal way.
I thought you would say, sorry, Sushant, continue.
What? So that was an empty road, right? What about the traffic road? What is the top speed you've done? And again, which car?
I mean, hard to say. I mean, can't. To be honest, sometimes I think when the expressway originally opened, it would have been around, or it was just opening 20 years ago. I think we had an Alfa Romeo and a Mitsubishi RS6. So I think over there, 220, 230 was a breeze on our Mumbai expressway. But that was when it was just opened or not fully opened. Again, we got access to it to drive on it.
And one more question with the potholes in Mumbai and the flooding in Mumbai, which is which you can evade through the water. Which car would you recommend as the best bet? Definitely you keep seeing videos of Mahindra cars doing well on that front. And would you recommend top-up exhaust connector kind of a thing which will help you evade through water?
So it's not so much the exhaust which is a problem because typically with the if it's not too deep, I mean you can still with the pressure of the exhaust, you keep the revs going. The water won't go into the exhaust. The bigger challenge is what they call water ingestion, which it goes in. If water goes into your engine is gone. And this has been the problem with certain German cars because by design they have their inlet very low down and up in front. So it's very easy for them to suck water. And in fact, there's a special insurance for what they call hydrostatic lock, which people take, which is only for the for the engines. So yeah, I think that's the bigger problem. But I think any SUVs, as the main thing is as high an SUV as possible, those are the best. Ultimate SUV for Bombay floods today, I think, would be the Land Rover Defender. The only thing is it costs over a crore, but it's got the highest water wading capability right now. Even a Jeep, Urvi will be happy, is very, very good because again, that's a car that's designed to go into water. In fact, Jeep have some crazy regulation that they make sure that their cars, even if it's stationary in water for some time, water doesn't get into the gearbox, the transfer case. They have these certain standards which they have because the cars are known, for off-roading, going through rivers and stuff like that. So Mumbai monsoon in a Jeep is probably, I would buy a Jeep just for that.
So the Jeep Compass or the Wrangler?
Well, Wrangler, of course, much more. It's a more extreme one, higher water wading capabilities, but even the Compass, being a Jeep, will have good water wading capabilities.
So, okay, fine. Thanks.
So I'm just taking the last two questions that are there to wrap this entire session. There's one that says, do you recommend a butterfly door in cars? And there is an American car known as Zonsum. I'm sorry if I'm pronouncing it wrong, but it's Xonnunsum.
Okay, I haven't heard of that, to be honest, so I don't know on that. But see, butterfly.
I think that is American cars consume. It is I think Pradeep has misspelled it as consume.
Okay, sorry, my bad. Me and my car focus. Sorry. So yes, do you recommend a butterfly door in cars? Sorry.
So, butterfly doors, I mean, recommend it. It's just a style statement. It looks good. The way they open, it's got a very dramatic way of opening. They also have some functional purpose. In a low-end car, it's easier to get in and out of because, the doors open on top. So, cars like McLarens and all, they have butterfly doors. So it's more of a style statement, to be honest. So, I mean, recommend meaning it's not our choice. It's what the car guy gives you. So, if you like that, I mean, there's no problem. I mean, they look pretty cool.
So yeah, coming back to, do American cars consume more fuel instead of the wrong word I used previously?
Yeah, no, so I think that typically, let's put it this way, the Americans still are not as, let's say, sensitive to fuel efficiency as we are. So generally, American cars tend to have bigger engines. They still have their V6s, I mean, V8s still going on. So generally, because they have large engines, they tend to consume more fuel. But that's not to say that, any large engine car would consume fuel. So it's just that the genre of cars they have, which are big cars with big engines, they would typically consume more fuel than a small car with a small engine.
JD, I have a question. Can I?
Sure, please go ahead, Jitin.
We normally do our overnight trips for 3 nights. So my question to you is, what would be your recommendation for 4 days road trip?
From where? From Mumbai?
Mumbai, yeah.
I mean, a lot of options. I mean, I personally, I think not many people have done it, but to take the real coastal road down to Goa, I'm not talking about NH17. I'm talking about the real coastal road via Kashid and Murud. And, there's some really quaint roads over there, some decent accommodation also. And, even going towards Sindhu Durg, where I think they've got a high-end now Coco Shambhala over there. But yeah, I like that. I think that's one trip which is pretty good. Again, Mahabaleshwar is a favorite, but again, if you do it via Poladpur, it's a different experience if you like to drive. And you can do some of the forts which are there, like Raigad and Pratapgarh as well. But otherwise, Nasik side, also the roads around Trimbakeshwar, if you like driving, very quiet, very, very good roads over there as well. But I think otherwise, to go really far, the other place which is quite accessible right now, and we've done a trip, is to Ahilya to Maheshwar, which is one long day, one long drive. And now I believe the Nagpur highway is opening up, which is fabulous. So it makes getting to those areas, Pench, Tadoba, that much more accessible. So that's a slightly longer thing. And I think once this highway opens up, in fact, we're going to be driving on it soon. They've opened up one whole section where it's really, really a different level of road, which will really cut the time going to Indore dramatically, or going to Nagpur dramatically. And then from Nagpur, there are a lot of game sanctuaries one can go to.
Thank you.
Questions, if you don't mind, Janita.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
So one is, I love to do a lot of road trips. Okay, we've done Rajasthan, 10-15 days, Karnataka, Gujarat, entire Maharashtra, all of that, right? So I sometimes would look for good roads and maybe some company on that front. Do you know of any groups which are prominent and good where you could kind of do these things with?
Yeah, I do. I mean, there is this Facebook page. I think it's HVK. He's a guy he's known for his road trips. I think over there, a lot of people, it's a road trip hub. I think that's a very popular Facebook page number. I think HV Kumar is the guy. So HVK, if I'm not mistaken. And that's probably, he's the go-to guy for any road trip. But otherwise, honestly, we've kind of, how do I say, for us, we've not done road trips with groups. We sort of organize for specific groups. So for example, if Rotary wants to do one, we can do it. So it's basically, you've got to get your people together and, get someone to organize it for you.
Okay.
So the initial question that was from the part of club admin team was regarding the same, that they would love to organize. So that's the reason why Jitin has asked that question. So Shad, continue.
One more thing, so I've been a automobile enthusiast, and so as a during the college days, right? So every auto car magazine or any car magazine for that matter, which would have a lot of these cars, top speeds, I've probably beaten all of them which were written down.
Right.
And my son apparently still is not 18, but he's also pretty enthusiastic. And when it comes to cars, he follows Autocar religiously. Every single YouTube that he goes through it. So he's very keen to do an internship with you guys. Can something be worked out on that front?
Yeah, sure, no problem. Just write to me. I think they've got my email address. So, or I can even put it down over here if you want. Let me do that.
I can share it. with him.
Can share
Surely.
it?
I can share it with him. The only last question that I'm going to take over here is about the customization of cars. Is it a big market? And we know only of Mr. Dilip Chhabria. Any new players in the market?
So it is a big market. I mean, there are quite a lot of customization shops which have opened up. I mean, no one really, but I think what people are doing, right, depends on the customization. A lot of mods happening to increase performance these days. People chip their cars, whether it's diesel or petrol, want to increase the performance. Accessorization has become really big. But I think, let's say total customization, it's a little limited because people are tending to run into problems with RTO because you can't really modify the car beyond a point. It's becomes sort of illegal. So there's a slight limit on that. But I think accessorization is really growing by leaps and bounds, and every manufacturer is offering a bigger spread of accessories, factory fitted. So that's becoming quite popular. So when people buy a car, they really leave with just the bare car. There's always something thrown in. But otherwise, customization, beyond that, not too many doing it. Yeah, Dilip Chhabria is really the best known and has done a great job of a lot of cars, but there's no one really of that level.
Okay, there is a request for you to please share your Insta link so that we could follow you and see the amazing road trips that you do and probably get inspired to take one very soon enough.
My name on both Twitter and Insta, that's what it is.
So for members who really want to follow quickly, just take this and you could take it from the chat box. So Mr. Saurabh-ji, it has been an amazing experience sharing from your side and for us to take back a lot about cars.
No, it's been a pleasure talking to you all. Yeah, so thanks.
Right from F1 to the high-end cars to the cars that are not spoken about and to the electric cars and to the Teslas. I think we've got it all today well spoken about by you. Really, it was a pleasure having you over. I would now request Manish, who has been kind enough to invite you as a speaker for the evening, to please give the vote of thanks for the evening. Manish, over to you.
Hi, friends. Anyway, Hormus, it is thanks to Hormus that we got to see an array of cars in our compound because he has a studio here, and every time there should be a Ferrari, there should be a Lamborghini, which should come for shoots, and we all used to be outside the house looking at the roaring cars. So thanks to him that we've got to see all the best cars. Thanks, Hormus, for that.
My pleasure.
And of course, I personally never knew that as a journalist, auto journalist, you have to travel so much, you have so much of preparation, and there's so much of hardships also involved. So thanks for that absolute insight. And thanks for the insight on the cars and the new cars that are coming in. It was an amazing, amazing drive through today we had. And we hope that we will soon organize a road trip with your help for the Rotary. We're looking forward to that. And of course, my regards to Nayad and the family.
Thank you, Manish. Regards to your family as well. Hope to see you sometime soon in the compound. Yeah.
Yeah, very soon with your cars.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Manish. May I now request Rotarian Pooja Sharma to do her secretarial announcements for the evening?
Thank you, Jankarna. I want to say कि होश वालों को खबर क्या, बेखुदी क्या चीज है, इश्क कीजिए फिर समझिए आशिकी क्या चीज है. जी हाँ, इश्क और जुनून समझ में कम आता है और दिल में ज्यादा बस जाता है. Same happened with me today, but I really want to share that recently we had a pleasure of traveling through Spiti Valley, and I could so relate to you, Saurabh-ji, when you're talking and feeling about the same. And I also loved the term revenge travel. I'm so into it. We are flying to Spain on this Sunday, and I'm so looking forward to some amazing car drive in south of Spain. Thank you, Saurabh-ji, so much for sharing your love, passion, and exciting life experiences. And I'm so happy to announce that at one time we had 50 plus logins from our members and spouse. Thank you, everyone. Once again, sending best wishes to all the members and spouse who had their birthdays and anniversaries in the month of August, especially to Siraj, who has his birthday today. Happy birthday, Siraj. Yasir Fatehi, Himangi Shah, Krishna ji, Satin Kapadia ji. In advance, I wish you happy birthday. Your birthdays are tomorrow. And now we are also looking forward to meeting on Sunday. Sunday brunch is waiting for us. So I am also very excited. So see you all on Sunday. Thank you so much. Over to you, Jankarna.
Thank you so very much, Pooja, for your inimitable style in Hindi. It is the most pleasurable thing to hear. Thank you so very much. The meeting is adjourned for the day. Thank you, members.
Thank you, Jankana. Great meeting.
Thanks, Manish.
you,
It was
guys.
really nice.